Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to Paris Sustainable Brands. This is fantastic. It took 15 years, Coanne, but better late than never. And what a beautiful room and an assembly of people. And we're thrilled to be here. Our sort of opening panel obligation is to engage people around the rationale and inspiration to be bold as brands and companies driving forward. And we know the context is challenging. We know that things are being disrupted and lots of questions happening across the world. We have extraordinary crises. We have a climate crisis, a water crisis, an inequality crisis. We have fragile economic models that we're trying to promote. We have a biodiversity crisis. We're beginning the 6th great wave of extinction. So there's a severity and a seriousness that we need to attend to. And we see a response across the world in asking questions. What is the role of business? What is the good life that we're trying to create? And we have these wonderful sustainable development goals that have defined what good looks like, the world that we want, and we have a decade to try and achieve it together. And we have a great deal of impatience. We're seeing, amazing levels of activism from the Gilets jaunes here in France to Extinction Rebellion in the UK and the Sunrise Movement in the US and Greta Thunberg and all these wonderful children that are protesting and demanding a future for themselves going forward. So in that context, we need clearer and stronger leadership going forward. And one of the wonderful bits of research that we have at GlobeScan with our colleagues at Sustainability has been a survey of experts across the world, business leaders, NGO leaders, government leaders, and academics who are deeply interested in sustainable development. And they have been identifying leadership companies over 22 years now. And I am thrilled to say that both Interface and Danone are recognized, along with Unilever and Patagonia and IKEA and Natura, as examples of leadership companies that we need to aspire to collectively as businesses. So in that context, I'm thrilled to have 2 representatives of both of those companies, Emmanuel Faber, the Chief Executive Officer of Danone, and ERIN MEEZAN, the Chief Sustainability Officer of Interface. A quick question before we go to Emmanuel. Everyone knows who Danone is. We're in Paris, of course. Who knows Interface? I mean, hands up if you've heard of Interface. All right. It's interesting, yeah. So, and you can give an explanation, but I wanted to get a read of the room. So, Emmanuel, I would love to hear your thoughts on the urgency of corporate sustainability and where we're going forward.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for welcoming us. Welcome all of you, by the way, here in Paris. We have a team of Danoners, as I told you earlier, Chris, because I think this is an important event and we have a lot to learn from many other people, so I hope you'll have fruitful discussions, interactions all together. Be bold is the theme of the session as you introduced it, and I think your way of painting where the world is and where it's going and how fast it's going there, I think is a clear case for why, if we are not bold, we are simply facing the risk of being meaningless, absolutely meaningless, and probably in the short or in the midterm, dead. And when I say dead, I'm not only speaking about me personally, which is a statistically pretty obvious thing one day, but I'm really speaking about our whole species, what it would have left on this planet in the history, in the greater scheme of things, which I don't know much about. And when it comes to the role of business in this, as you just said, there are a lot of expectations. I'm thrilled about the fact that when I speak to governments and when I speak to CEOs, I can see how much business has actually taken the roadmap of SDGs as an important one compared to government. Governments still have to catch up in many ways. Many, at least large companies, have used the SDGs as a common platform to thread objectives together that would meaningfully be reached by 2030. And we are trying our own on this. Being bold in many ways is what companies need to do, and I would insist on the fact that when you say corporate, I would say brand activism even more than corporate, because I think that in this digital era, this is not the end of the brands. This is a typical era where brands will continue to be the point of where hearts, where minds, where speeches, thoughts will gather, the focal points. And there is a huge need for focal points of people gathering with a common mindset on common goals and ideas together. And I think brands can be and will be that. And by the way, you were mentioning Gilets Jaunes. Gilets Jaunes is a brand. And Rebel Extension Rebel is a brand as well in the UK. And so there is an overarching trend to make brands out of ideas. And so even more than companies, it's about brand activism. And I would insist on the fact that being bold is not only about companies being bold, but brands being bold. And not even brands, but the people behind the brand, the people of the brands, the tribes that are making the brands. They need to be bold and brave. If they want to be meaningful, the 12 hours a day that they're working for that brand, serving a broader purpose. It's kind of the obvious in the sense that if you're a small brand, you will never thrive or even being noticed if you do not come bold. So it starts with that. But if you're a big brand, I would challenge all the companies that you mentioned earlier sponsoring this event, including, of course, us, Danone, that if we are not bold enough, we'll just die as companies, as brands. Our brands will just fade away and disappear as the old generations that created the problems and that never worked in solving them. So this is as simple as that. Either you're bold or you die. And to me, being bold means starting by making a clear purpose and a purpose clear to everyone. This is what I want to shoot for. That's my cause. That's what I'm going to follow as a cause. And you have 17 SDGs. You can pick up, whatever you want. But a company and a brand does not exist if it's not useful to someone. So it's as simple as that. Instead of thinking, I'm here to make 15% EBITDA margin or plus 3% next year, think about what you're truly useful for and restart from there. And from there, highlight this big goal. This goal needs to be bold. Then the next bold thing is to declare that you will start acting in a consistent manner with that. And I think the consistency is even more important than the size of what you do. But everything needs to unfold in a consistent manner. And this is being very bold, because it will force you to stop things that you were doing before, to change the way you work, for us to reformulate, put less sugar, more natural, going organic, regenerative agriculture, whatever. I mean, all the stuff that we're doing as a company that wants to nudge people into adopting healthier and more sustainable eating and drinking behaviors. And then the last thing, and I will finish with that, is probably the boldest of them all, is to acknowledge that you're not perfect and that you will never be perfect. And large companies hate that. Again, take the same companies. We hate that. I'm fighting within Danone, my own company, to allow the teams, myself included, to say, I'm not perfect. I know I will, and I will never be, and I will need your help to overcome that imperfection, to create ways that together we will create that new future, that bright future that we expect as a purpose. So being bold is this big purpose, this declaration of consistency over time, and probably the most powerful one is this declaration of being vulnerable, not being perfect, working hard, and trying to make progress day after day.
Wonderful, thank you, Emmanuel. So be bold or die, be vulnerable to try and create legitimacy and reality. And Erin, what are your thoughts on bold leadership?
I think, bold leadership is the reason that so many of you in the room raised your hand when Chris asked who knows interface. It was because 25 years ago, the founder of our business had a fundamental transformation in his thinking and set the company on a very different path. And I think the first lesson to that was it came from a customer. many people don't know that the transformational journey that Interface started on became important and relevant because we lost a job. We were competing to sell our flooring products. We are about $1 billion company, American-based, that makes flooring products and sells them around the world. And we were trying to sell some of our products into one of the first green buildings in California. And that architect was asking our salesperson, I think the products are great, I think the functionality works, but what is your company doing for the environment? And we'd never been asked that question before. We had no idea how to answer it. And when we lost this important opportunity, the word got back to our CEO, Ray Anderson, and he said, we're gonna figure out how to answer that question, not because he was an environmentalist or a conservationist, but because we were out of step with our customers. And so that really important signal that the market sent to us caused a transformation at Interface. It changed the mind of our founder. It led the company 25 years ago to sort of start this bold mission that at the time we called Mission Zero, and it was about getting the business to zero environmental impact. 25 years on, we've gotten really close to achieving some of those goals. We've reduced the waste to landfill from our business 91%. We've reduced the greenhouse gas emissions coming from our business 96%. We've transformed the products, reducing the carbon footprint of them almost 70%. So I think the important learning there is that stimulus can come from anywhere. It can come from an employee. It can come from a customer. A seemingly unimportant question that goes to a salesperson in California can really lead that transformation. So I think the first sort of ask of this audience is start interacting with companies on the consumer side, knowing that the future of the planet depends on it. Write those letters, say something on social media, talk to your sales reps, demand more of your companies, because you never know where that might lead. So I think that's the first piece of it. The second piece of it is that 25 years into this, Interface had a really interesting opportunity 2 years ago. Our founder died in 2011, and we got a new CEO in 2015. And he came from the outside, and I think his first instinct was that, okay, I've just taken on the leadership helm at this very sustainable company, and I'm just gonna kind of continue that bold vision. And a lot of us internally, knowing that we were 25 years in, were already saying, no, it's actually time to raise the bar. It's time to go beyond zero. It's time to transition our thinking from a company that just does less harm to a company that can have a positive impact. And we must declare a new mission. We must make ourselves really uncomfortable again. Because in that uncomfortableness of a really bold goal comes the innovation, comes the challenging thinking, comes the opportunity for recognition. And so, in 2016, Interface, actually, I convinced our CEO to stand up in front of a couple hundred customers and say the mission of Interface is now to reverse global warming. And we chose those words by design. We wanted to align our business with the problem we were trying to solve. And getting out of all the CSR speak and the incremental goals and all the do better stuff, we wanted to put front and center on the company's agenda, solving a large environmental challenge. And he was really uncomfortable. Now he's quite comfortable and very polished talking about it. But in the lead up to that, he was very uncomfortable risking our brand and saying, will people laugh at us? Will they say, well, you're just $1 billion company with 5,000 people. You can't possibly do that. You have no business talking about reversing global warming as a manufacturer. And I think 3 things were really important to getting him to that place. The first is showing him that we thought it was possible, that we had a level of optimism to transform our business from where we were to being a carbon negative business in about a 10-year time frame, and to show him that roadmap. I think the second was this idea that we would fundamentally shift the industry and our customers' mindsets and get them focused on where we needed to be. And so I think kind of the 3 pieces that are really important as we all talk over the next few days are sort of really asking yourself, what is your company or organization doing to act? That's the first bit. Set the bold purpose, as you said, set a new mission, get started in that direction. The second is, how are you enabling your people, your customers, your supply chain to live into that mission? That actually might be your better opportunity. If you have a CEO or a leader who's not ready to stand up and reverse global warming, you can actually start that internally by programmatically enabling your employees to do that and sort of rising from the bottom up. And then the third is, what are you doing to influence? You know, the whole idea behind this is we know that we can't reverse global warming with 5,000 people. But the second we put a carbon negative product into the built environment space, and architects and designers and large end users like the Googles and the HSBCs, who happen to be our largest customers, when they start demanding that of the other manufacturers and everybody else who's putting a product like that into their offices, that is how we will influence change.
Absolutely, please, yes.
Sorry, thank you, Erin. Big clap. So let me go personal for 2 minutes about what Erin has just said. She doesn't know, and I don't think many of you would. But Ray Anderson, the chairman and CEO of Interface, started this journey in 2006. In 2007 or 2008, I was working in China. We were facing huge environmental topics. We were starting our business in Bangladesh with Grameen Bank and Mohammed Yunus, and our idea was to use a non-plastic cup, polymer lactic acid cup, which is biodegradable. And I was looking for examples of people that had done something like this in the past. And one day I received, through email, by a friend, a commencement speech by Ray Anderson. And I read this, I start reading. And then it's like 10 pages, and I say, wow, my God, they've done that. This guy is, they do carpets, plastic carpets and tiles. Des carreaux de moquette, huh, in French. What a boring stuff. You know, it's all coming from, sorry, it's all coming from oil. And this guy not only says, I'm going to reverse polarity, but I'm going to be carbon neutral at some point. And he introduced this idea of the cycles, looking at the whole cycle. This was nearly 15 years ago. And I was so excited that I went into more research. I read so many things that these guys had written. And I can tell you here, very seriously, they were the people, Interface, these 5,000 people, smaller company in the middle of nowhere in the US, looking at it from the China, has been the eyes openers for me. They started my own business-conscious environmental journey. They started what made Danone able, 2 years later, in 2009, to say that by 2020, we would have diminished by 50% our carbon emissions. And they allowed us to go bold when we started our own cycles and say, we're going to be responsible for the whole cycle of production of CO2, including agriculture. So we now have an objective that we will one day be carbon neutral, including the whole agricultural cycle. This started there. So this is to say how much what you do, if it is consistent, whatever the size, but what mattered for me that day was not the size of it, was the consistency, the boldness of the objective of that person who died, I think, out of cancer in 2011. Sadly, I mean, I always wanted to meet with this guy, and I never could. So I thought I'd need to pay a tribute to Ray Anderson. Thank you, and congratulations.
It is remarkable, and it's testament how one small company, one individual can change the world and the ripple effect. What would Ray say about this? Here we are in Paris, and what would he say about this sort of gathering?
I mean, I think he'd be so delighted to see so many people and that the conversations are really happening. And he used to have this saying, which was, brighten the corner where you are. And it sort of acknowledges and recognizes we all have different levels of leadership and influence in our organizations, right? And as much as he was an amazing visionary for Interface, he didn't do it alone. he managed to change the minds and empower 4,000, 5,000 people in our company. And so wherever you are in the organization, whether you work with a CEO, whether you are in HR, whether you're a supplier, maybe you're a marketing company, maybe you're an events planning company that works with large companies, you have an opportunity to influence and challenge what those companies are doing. And so I think he would say kind of kudos for us all being here and the fact that this movement has really grown and we have amazing leaders like Emmanuel. And I think he would say to everyone else, go bright in the corner where you are.
Wonderful. Emmanuel, you referenced that brand activism and activating brands is really fundamental, and you made it very personal, I think. You said that the person running the brand has to be catalyzed. How do you approach that in Danone with your many brands? Is there a process? Is there a methodology? What's your technique?
Hey guys, do you want to answer? Well, we'd love to have a process. Actually, we were talking this morning before it started. We counted on you to help us build a process. So we'll be back in 2 days' time, gathering the learnings. Now, frankly, beyond what I just said, we don't have a process. Maybe there will be one day, because we will need to, if we want to reach scale and replicability and the ability to learn and then to capitalize on the learnings, all the don'ts more than the do's, but also the do's, there will be a process. But at this stage, the process is one name: disrupt. Disrupt, 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 disrupt. Change the way we work, change the way we work with agencies, change agencies if you need to, change the teams if you need to. We need more younger people. I'm not the generation that can, invent the tomorrow of our brands. So we need to empower people, and this is one thing that we are, one of these big changes that we are trying to bring to a company of the size of Danone is how to re-empower people. Because, and again, as I just said, I don't want people to hide behind the company. I don't want brands to hide behind the company. I don't want people to hide behind their brands. I want them to be in front of. I want them to be talking and engaging on behalf of the brand. They are the brand. I mean, there is nothing else than people behind a brand. If you, you can tell me what. I mean, everything is about people. So the process is this disruption, and how to authorize, encourage people to disrupt the way they think they are authorized to think, and in and by itself, it's a big challenge, and that's the one in which we are today.
Oh, I want to build on that. I think the permission piece is really important, and so I think when we say how do we enable our 5,000 people plus the multiple kind of spheres of influence in our supply chain, I think the first is awareness. And so one thing that Interface just did, and we actually did 20 years ago when we started, was we gathered 1,100 people, a fifth of our team from around the world, and we brought them to Atlanta. And we raised their level of awareness on the path to reversing global warming. And I have to tell you, lots of people, we have a large American base, but we have employees all over the world. Very educated people are incredibly skeptical and don't have the language to tell our customers, their families, what the pathway is to reverse global warming in a very simple way, right? Deep carbon reductions, deep decarbonization, carbon removal, protecting and enhancing natural sinks. So we brought 1,000 of our people around the world together to hear from people like Paul Hawken, who just sort of launched Project Drawdown a year and a half ago, to get them really familiar with the language and the understanding and the awareness of what it will take to reverse global warming. The second thing we did is we gave them permission. We put them in a room like this, and we said, you're authorized to go make change in our business. And it's an incredibly powerful thing that we forget to do, but we've taught people what their traditional roles are in a company from the time they come in and onboard. You're in sales, you're in marketing, you're in HR. We never say to them, you're here to help us change the business that will change the world. And we need to do that. We need to remember to do that and powerfully do it when they're together. And then the third is give them tools. So one of the things that we launched in our company was something called Hand Printer. It doesn't exist yet, but it's built on this methodology of if footprint reduction is how you measure being less bad, a handprint measures your positive impact in the world. And so there's this emerging methodology about how you would do that, and then there are tools called this website and this app, Hand Printer, that will allow our employees to go on and track and measure their positive impacts in the world. It's very pilot, it's very early, but this idea of giving people tools, so that gives context. When you decide to go Meatless Monday, you can actually figure out what that means for you in your city. But I think that permission piece is so important. We just don't do it enough.
Wonderful. As we're close to end of time, Emmanuel, what are your recommendations to all of us as we spend the next 3 days digging into these challenges and the opportunities and trying to get inspiration from examples like Danone and Interface?
Well, I think we said a lot already. My only recommendation would be don't hesitate to make it personal. And I would even say, without making it personal, it will not work. It's really a matter of discovering, as I think most of us in this room have already discovered, otherwise we would probably not be in this room, is how much rewarding it is as a person to be working, recognizing that we will never be perfect again, and I insist on this, to be working on perfecting the way we impact as a person in the relationship that we have with our communities and we have with ourselves ultimately. So it's not only a brand journey, but it's really a journey about the self-awareness of who we are as a person in this world. And I found this disruption, constant disruption, revisiting these elements of consciousness as being a truly rich personal journey. And I hope and wish that each and all of you here will continue to enjoy that journey.
Wonderful. Well, we are very grateful to have two of leading, I think, thought leaders on brand sustainability rather than corporate sustainability here. So please, mesdames et messieurs, join me in thanking Emmanuel and ERIN.